Have you seen me calling CQ on the radio and wondering what the heck I'm doing? Well, stick around. Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, Tim here, overlanding for fun and 2014 Liberty Valley Cornhole Champ. So in the past few weeks, if you've been watching videos on my social media, you've seen me just kind of jumping on the radio, calling CQ and talking to other operators across the United States and outside of the United States. So my goal was to kind of create an interest, not to create new amateur radio operators, but to show us in the off-roading community how effective amateur radio can be to communicate with the outside in the event of an emergency. Now, almost all of us carry cell phones, and that's great. Some of us might have two-way messengers or personal locator beacons if we do a lot of hiking or off the grid. But in general, I think the majority of us, we have a cell phone and we have maybe a GMRS radio. Now, those are okay if you're in an area that has the infrastructure for that to really work. But if you're not, what do? And that's where the ham radio comes in. Now, I'm not trying to replace, and I'm not suggesting that you use this over a personal locator beacon or a two-way satellite messenger, but I think it's a good tool to have in conjunction with, or one or the other, depending on what you feel is best for your situation. Now, ham radio is a licensed service here in the United States and in most countries. But here, and I can't speak for every country, but at least in the United States, you do not need a license to transmit on amateur radio frequencies if it's a true emergency and you have no other means of communication. So for example, if you're out in BLM land out west and you're far enough away that there's no cell phone towers and you have no other way of communicating, something like this is your answer. Now, the nice thing about this is, compared to some of the other services, is it also gives you the ability to get information back and forth. If somebody is injured and you need to provide first aid and you don't know necessarily how to do it, somebody can talk you through that. And that's kind of where this comes into play. And definitely, I think it's a good thing for everybody to kind of at least understand it. Now, with amateur radio, there's many aspects of the hobby. Some people are interested in digital modes. Some people are interested in the original digital mode, which is CW or Morse code. Some people like to, what we call rag chew, and that's just to carry on conversations. And some people like myself like to do things called POTA, Parks on the Air. And once again, I will put a link to their website down below so you can read more about the program. But the point of it is to get amateur radio operators out into the field with portable gear to be able to set it up and effectively communicate with other operators in the event of a natural disaster, a geopolitical event, a man-made disaster, or something where the traditional forms of communication are just completely unavailable. So that's kind of the backstory of what I'm doing here. But I also in this video wanted to show you what I take with me every time I go out in my truck, in my Bronco, and go off the grid. Now, it's actually mostly used equipment I've got in here too. So it's not a huge investment. There is some investment, and newer equipment's going to cost more than used equipment. Used equipment, you have to be careful that what you're buying works good and effectively. And doing some things like Parks on the Air is how you go out and test that equipment and get an actual understanding of how well it's working by making contacts with other stations throughout the country. So without further ado, let's go ahead and turn to what I've got inside my case, talk about it briefly, and we'll go from there. Now, if you've got questions about any of the equipment that I have in here, please put those in the comment section below. Now, first and foremost, I carry an orange case in the truck, and part of the reason for that is that in the event of an emergency, I know where it's at. It's the only orange one I carry. And if I have to send my kids or my wife or some passenger with me to go and grab it, it's very easy to find. It's something that we can grab. If the Bronco's just broken down, that's one thing. But if I went off the road or I'm upside down in a ditch or we need to get away from the vehicle for whatever reason, it's all self-contained in this case. All right, so in the case, I've got a few things. Now, with amateur radio, you need a couple items. You need power, you need your radio, you need transmission line, and you need an antenna. So in here, I've got a couple jumpers of coax, and I've got two lengths of coax. I've got one that's 25 feet, and I've got one that's 50 feet. And between these two, I can set up my antenna at a little bit of a distance away from where I'm at, if that's what I'm going to need to get my antenna up higher in the air. So that's the first part. You got to have that transmission line to get from your radio to your antenna. Power. In here, I've got a 20 amp hour BioEneo lithium ion battery. Now this battery is got a little bit of weight to it, but it is 20 amp hours, which is nice because that will provide a fair amount of listening time, power for listening. Now this particular radio I've got in standby mode when I'm not transmitting uses about 2 amps. When I'm transmitting at full power at 100 watts, it's about 25, 26 amps. So obviously the higher the power and the more you transmit, the quicker this battery is going to wear down. But this is, like I said, a decent sized battery that's going to last for a while. Now I also in the back, and I'll have a video coming up about that in the future here, I've actually installed two 30 amp circuits in the back of the Bronco directly wired into the battery. So I also have a way to power the radio when I'm set up here and don't have to use the battery. So got the battery. So we've got the power portion and we've got the feed line from the radio. So we can power our radio and we can also now get our transmission from the radio to the antenna. So the antenna. Now this is a neat little thing. This is a backpacking antenna, and it's made by a company called Pactenna. And they've got some really cool designs. This style of antenna, it's an in-fed half wave. This is not a new style. This is just their take on it. So this particular antenna with the coil of wire that's on here is good for the 20 meter band, which is the 14 megahertz band. That generally is very, propagation is very good on that band throughout the morning, early afternoon, and into the evening, depending on just the propagation of your area. Now, when I need to go to a lower frequency that tends to have better propagation in the later afternoon, early to mid evenings, I have an extension here that I can add to this antenna to extend the length of it so I can use the lower frequencies. So that's my antenna. All told, this is really geared for backpackers, but it's great because I can just slide it in here. It doesn't provide a whole lot of weight, extra weight to what I'm carrying. So in addition to the antenna, I also have a inline choke. Now this helps in cutting out some of the common mode current that's coming back on the coax into the radio. So the choke cuts out the noise and makes it easier to hear distant stations. In addition to the battery, I've got a power cable that has the Anderson power pole connectors on it, which are nice because they're quick disconnect type connectors, and you just line them up and plug them in. And then when you're done, you just pull them apart. So I have a set of Anderson power poles on the battery. This plugs into that. I do have a fuse in here that in case there's any kind of short, the fuse will pop and helps out. I also have a inline meter. It's a power and voltage meter, which then lets me know how much power is available, how much voltage is available in the battery, how much current I've consumed while I'm operating. So that's always nice to have in case you have to ration your power out. That'll give you a better opportunity to understand what that is. So we've got power, we've got feed line, we've got antenna. Well, how do we get the antenna up in the air? So there's a couple things to remember for amateur radio when it comes to antenna placement. Outside is better than inside, higher is better than lower. So depending on your situation, you might have an opportunity to say you're in a wooded area where you can take something like this. This is a arborist bag. I've got it tied to some string. I can throw this up in a tree over a branch, tie this end off to the end of the antenna, and then I can use that to hoist the antenna up into the tree, and that will give me elevation that I need. You may not have that opportunity, but the higher you can get it, the better. Finally, we've got the radio. Now this is a Yaesu 857D, and this is actually a discontinued radio, and I bought it used probably 6-7 years ago. And I'm going to go ahead and throw a video up here real quick, but using this radio, I was able to make contact with a station in South Africa with using this antenna, this radio, and this battery. Was that a Victoria 5 Whiskey station?
Victoria 5-1, Victor 5-1, Victoria 51, Whiskey. Victoria number 5, number 1, Whiskey, Paprika.
QSL on the Victor 5-1 Whiskey. Sir, you are by far my furthest contact on a mobile station to date. So thank you very much. You are 5-9 into the Morgan Monroe State Park for Park Kilo 4215 QSL.
QSL, thank you, dear. 5 and 3 and 73.
So it doesn't take a whole lot to do that. This is still a very good radio to have. There's some newer ones out there, better filtering, stuff like that. Some of the newer software-defined radios are a little bit smaller, but in general, this is what I'd refer to as a standard mobile footprint, as opposed to one that's a desktop or a tabletop footprint that's a little bit bigger. So that, real quick, is kind of the everyday carry, if you want to call it that, of stuff that I take with me whenever I go out off-road. So because I'm also a ham radio operator, we do these things called Parks on the Air, where we like to get together as friends. A group of us will go out, and maybe we do it on a Saturday and Sunday. We go meet for breakfast, then we go set up at a state park somewhere and do a little bit of traveling in the state, and it's kind of fun. So if you have any questions about any of this stuff, please let me know in the comment section below. So if you like this kind of content, please subscribe to the channel, share this video with your friends, and give me a thumbs up. And hopefully one day we'll catch you on the air. If not, we'll see you on the trail. Tim out.